is this is what's called a declaration sheet. We get them, you get them every time you renew your insurance, and it tells you what your coverages are. Now, many times in today's world, people buy insurance over the internet, or maybe, again, like I said, had a policy that has been carried on for years. The government in Pennsylvania requires us to have automobile insurance, but the only thing that the government requires are the things that truly protect the government's interest, which is not necessarily protecting your interests. The government is interested in making sure that you have bought sufficient coverage should you cause a problem for somebody else. The government does not have an interest in making sure that you have protected yourself. What the government requires is a very minimal amount of coverage for what we call bodily injury, which again would be if you cause an accident covering somebody else, so that you were the cause. And this is what we're seeing right here. It says bodily injury. And this is a real policy, and I've brought it with you. I've brought a few different ones because they all look a little bit different. And this one has 100, 300. And a lot of times insurance agents will say, okay, well, you've got 100, 300, you've got 10,000 medical expenses, and you've got this, that, and the other thing, and your head's spinning. Because you're like, well, wait a second, what does all of this actually mean? What this means is that this policy has $100,000 if you cause an accident for somebody else. That covers you up to that point, up to a value of $100,000 for any one person who was injured. If you cause an accident that caused a car of 4 people to be injured, the total maximum for that entire vehicle for anybody in there would be $300. And what they don't tell you is anything after that, if becomes your personal responsibility. Medical expenses. This is important to know because this is one thing the government requires you to buy that helps you. And that is if you're injured in an automobile accident, the government requires you to have $5,000, this policy shows 10, $5,000 worth of medical coverage. The good thing about that is unlike what we're seeing in Obamacare with a lot of the deductibles, there are no deductibles on this. You go, it pays directly, the auto insurance pays you directly. You go to the emergency room, they pay your bill. They have to, and the emergency rooms and the doctors have to accept a specific schedule. They can't collect the difference from you from that percentage. Now, once the amount's used up, it becomes your responsibility, whether it be through health insurance or otherwise. But what's good is that should something happen to you and you need to go to the doctor, you need to go to the emergency room, you don't have to use your health insurance and you don't have to have a deductible, which is why $10,000 is a good idea. The government only requires 5. So one thing you always want to check is double check on that. $5,000 gets used up pretty quickly in today's world. So you want to look at your policy and you want to make sure that you've protected yourself for really at least 10. The next thing that we see on the policy is funeral expenses, which are sort of self-explanatory. And then we see something called uninsured motorist coverage, and below that, underinsured motorist coverage. And I don't know that anybody in the room really understands exactly what that is. There are two, you do? You're married to a lawyer, you got it. Well, you're going to be the one that knows it then. But few people do, and so many people walk into my office and say they really didn't understand what this is. What this is coverage that you buy to protect yourself. The government does not require it. Many people do not have it because they see it as a small dollar line of savings. But once I explain to you what it is, you might understand why you really need to have it. Uninsured motorist coverage, that comes into play if somebody else causes the accident and you are the one that's hurt. You have bought protection for yourself in case that person had their policy lapse, that person forgot to buy their policy, That person never bought a policy. You have now protected yourself. Underinsured is very similar. Let's say the person who caused the accident only bought what the government requires is the minimum, which is $15,000 in Pennsylvania. And that, should someone be hurt, can really be used up very, very quickly. In today's world, if you go to the emergency room and you go to physical therapy and you have out-of-pocket expenses and things along that nature, $15,000 goes very, very quickly. And we're not even talking about compensation to you for your injury. We're just talking about the amount of expenses that can come very, very quickly in today's world. And underinsured motorist coverage is very important for you to have. Now, let me show you something that we see very, very regularly. And that is, let's look at number 5.